because we've had a little bit of technological difficulties here with Stephen. So
Yes,
this is going to, unfortunately, this is the way the world rolls these days. So
absolutely.
yes, so this is going to be in two parts of the video. And now you were talking about how we don't hear a lot about the female
Right,
era
right.
as
I
such.
think I left off with Neat with Sixth Dynasty. Then you
Yeah.
have the 18th Dynasty with Hatshepsut. Then you have 19th Dynasty Sobek Neferu. Then of course we have Nefertari, Nefertiti, and Cleopatra. So what we're important to say, the Egyptian dynastic civilization began with a woman, Neat Hotep, and ended with a woman, Cleopatra, who was actually the seventh woman who had that title. So officially she's Cleopatra the seventh. So it starts with a woman, it ends with a woman. So, but all the Egyptologists want to talk about is the male kings.
Yes, yes, yes. And so why don't we come back to this idea, this concept that you were told by Hakeem about the Sphinx being the great mother? Because I know some people who aren't familiar with your work, aren't familiar with this concept, they're probably going to be going, what? What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
How did he come to that idea? Because I've been very
That's
fortunate in actually, I went on a tour with Jocelyn and also someone else that you know, which is Patricia Laitman, and
yes.
actually went around the Sphinx, and I actually went down the back, and yes, you can definitely feel a very, not only a feline, because it's a lion, of course, but a very feminine energy that is almost, it's a bit like Stonehenge. You don't see much of it from the outside, but when you get closer,
And you can actually touch her.
and yes,
Yes, yes,
yes,
yes. Well, here's the reason why. The ancient Cometians, and the Kemet is the word we use instead of Egypt, which is a Greek word. Chem was a black land. That's the word of the civilization. So we call them Cometians. So they were obviously major observers of nature. Nature, netter. It's the same thing. The Greeks heard the word netter, and they said, "Oh, that's like our word physis, which we would physical or physical." Well, the Romans came in, heard the Greeks pronounce it netter, so they said it's like our word natura. So nature, netter, same thing. So they observed in nature the great animals that were mothers, and the lioness is top of the list. In fact, again, I would like to bring this up. I just saw something on Instagram just the other day, and it was showing a lioness with her cubs, and she's with her cubs. Along comes this huge male lion that's at least 3 times as big as she is, and he immediately starts to attack her cubs. Now, the irony of it is they're his children. He's their father. Yet, but it is a fact of nature that certain males will try to kill. Grizzly bears do it all the time in the U.S. A male grizzly will try to kill cubs, so the female will go into heat, and he can mate with her again. So this is what this lion was wanting to do. He wanted to mate with her again. So he's going to try to kill her cubs, so she'll go into heat. But she turned on him like the famous expression, "a woman scorned." She turned on him and beat the hell out of him, had 1/3 his size, and chased him off. That's the unconditional love of mother. This is what Sekhmet represents, which the Cometians considered the greatest force in the universe, the unconditional love of mother. So this is why they chose a lioness to represent Tefnut, Sekhmet, Mut, the images we see of the great mother to the Cometians were a lioness. Also a vulture. Interesting enough, they found that the female vulture was also a great mother and would fight to the death to protect her brood. So Nekhbet is another symbol, the vulture of the great mother. So that's why. And again, he said she spit when she wanted to be in physical form because you can't define, you can't weigh spit. It has no volume, no mass. You really can't define her. But there's the first statue of her. And then again, we see all the Venus figurines, which of course Jesus, Mother Mary, and baby Jesus comes straight out of Isis suckling Horus. It's the same image. It's always the mother. When I would do my lectures, I'd say, who teaches a cat to be a cat? Always mama. Who teaches a dog to be a dog? Mama. Who teaches a human where to go to the bathroom and where not to? Mother. It's our first teacher, our greatest teacher, and the teacher throughout our life. Denzel Washington, the famous American actor, just gave a talk where he said, who is a mother's first love? Her eldest son. Who's a boy's love? that he never forgets his mother. I used to say, who's the one that's standing in the first row when a serial killer is going to be electrocuted or hung? It's still his mama. She's always going to be there. No matter what he's done in his life, always mama is there. And that was the most powerful force to the ancient people, even through dynastic times. Now I'm talking about pre-dynastic times when it was just the great mother. But in dynastic times, when they had all these different netters, gods and goddesses, as they call them, it was still always the female that was most important.
Mhm.
And I'll give you one more thing before we can just wrap it up or go into whatever you want. The Ankh, right, has an exoteric, and of course I always wear one, exoteric and esoteric meaning. The exoteric is life. They say the Ankh means life. Well, the Egyptologists will tell you, male chauvinists that they are, that it's the penis and the vagina. Hakim would say, wrong, thanks for playing. The Ankh represents the vagina, the fallopian tubes, and the womb, where all human life comes from. But the esoteric meaning is water, which is one of the things Hakim wanted me to concentrate on, the knowledge that the ancients had of sound and water. Why water? Well, all the keys to the temples, even in dynastic times, were in the shape of an ankh. Why? Because water is the key to life.
Mm.
So it all
And
comes back to that understanding. And even again, it's so great if people study Egyptology with that understanding. Like we would say, Hakim and I founded chematology, very different than Egyptology. But we always say you can't throw out the baby in the bathwater. If you think of it as an edifice, a building, Egyptology is the basement, the foundation. You need the foundation. But if you want to go to the penthouse, that's chematology, and that's matriarchy and matrilineal descent. All throughout dynastic history, descent was always from mother to the eldest daughter. There's a famous papyrus that was found in the Middle Kingdom period. We're talking about 1800, 2000 BCE, where a man was bringing into court, and they had courts. Interestingly enough, all throughout dynastic Kemet, the judges were only women. No male judges, only women. There were male barristers, defense attorneys, prosecutors, whatever, but only judges were women. And so all throughout, he's trying to sue his sister for possession of the land, and he loses the case badly because he never could catch. It was always known, even to the time of Cleopatra, when the Greeks had come in, patrilinealized Egypt, where the Romans came in, made Egypt a vassal state. Still, the last ruler of Egypt was Cleopatra, a woman.
and as you said, there's this line, and it's not just in ancient Egypt, it's in, and we can still see it in a lot of indigenous peoples today, even here
Absolutely,
in Australia with the Aboriginal peoples. Yes,
absolutely.
it's almost like the man might be the forefront, but the law giver, the law taker, the law explainer is the women, the
That's
grandmothers,
right.
as you said, behind there. And you
The,
did
why,
mention,
the reason why Egypt is so different today, of course, is Islamic culture. It's major patriarchal dominant. So you see only the men in the coffee shops smoking shisha and talking and discussing. The women are in the groups at home talking, but they still the wisdom. Egyptian women are the most liberated women in all of Islamic countries because Egyptian women, you will see, and you might have seen when you were there, that you'll see a woman driving a car by herself. A woman in Egypt can have a bank account. No, not in Saudi Arabia. You'll never see a woman driving a car by herself in Saudi Arabia. And a woman cannot gain in anything without her male consent. Well, Egyptian women are most liberated because they still have that background of the Commission. And uh, and so it's still there today. And I wanted to, before we finish, to talk about, you talked about indigenous. And this is why in this conference I had with Jocelyn, I was telling people you got to listen to the indigenous teachers, especially the grandmothers. And she had a lot of grandmothers in this conference. The grandmothers are bringing back the ancient wisdom. So when Thomas Jefferson and his disciple James Madison want to set up the American system, James Madison was very fascinated by the Haudenosaunee, who were originally called not erroneously called Iroquois. They were the Five Nations, became the Six Nations. Here's what happened briefly in their history. They were having, these five nations were at war for hundreds of years. They originally were matriarchal people who, like other cultures, like in Tibet, even today, had become patriarchal. Like most all countries and cultures, it is the cycle. The cycle now is dominated by patriarchy, and it's about to end, which Hakim called now the awakening. That is why we're doing this talk and having this conference. It is time for the awakening. So the women, the grandmothers got together and said, this, for hundreds of years, they were fighting these stupid wars led by these male chiefs. Stupid, stupid wars. And this is even reflected in a great Greek play by Aeschylus, Lysistrata. Lysistrata, the women decide to stop the Athenians from fighting war by refusing to have sex with them. It's a great comedy. It's a great play, and they win the day. Well, this is actual history, I'm telling you. These grandmothers got together and said, we got to stop this. We got to go back to the old ways. So they set up a tripartite system of government. They decided the 5 tribes, which would become the 6 tribes, would each elect representatives from each tribe. They would meet in a longhouse, and they would make the rules, the laws for the society. Okay. They were men and women. Then they would say, in the 5 tribes, they would have a rotating system of one chief. They would elect one, and it would be rotating. It wouldn't be for life. It would be each different 5 tribes would choose a different chief. But he was a figurehead. He would only agree to the laws that were passed in the White House. And then there was what we would today call the Supreme Court. 9, we have 9. And the indigenous grandmothers were the rules. And this is where James Madison blew it, because he brought in the British system of impeachment instead of doing what the Haudenosaunee did. If the grandmothers decided that the chief was out of line, they just, by majority vote, kicked his ass right out. If they decided the laws that came out of the Longhouse didn't benefit every single member of the child, including man, woman, and child, they would throw the laws out just by majority vote. Unfortunately, we have to have a stupid impeachment system, and that's why we have the problems we have. And I'm not going to get into politics. Hakim said the word is politika. In Greek means city talk, which means there was different talk in the city than there was in the countryside. Well, politics is patriarchal. That's what the Greeks were. Greeks supposedly invented democracy, but it was only for men. Women didn't take part in democracy in Greece, and certainly not in Rome. And these are the models that we have for Western culture, for the Americas, for Australia, for New Zealand. But you guys are much better, especially New Zealand. It has a woman leader, a great leader. She's a great leader. And we still haven't had a woman president. We should. We should have had one 100 years ago. But anyway, that's how it was. The Haudenosaunee became the model of the American 3-part system of government. But the Supreme Court in our country should be 9 women, indigenous of all races, white, black, yellow, red, all people. And they should have been the ones who decide. But it's going to happen. This is my Hakim was adamant. What she called the time, the awakening. That things are going to change. This is why you're doing what you're doing. This is the second wave of feminism I see coming from the 70s when we started it. Now coming back today, I'm seeing a lot of women standing up. Women in every country in the world have to stand up and throw off the shackles of patriarchy. As I told Jocelyn, my soul mission, my life mission was to bring down the pillars of patriarchy. And that's been this whole talk that I've done with you.
No, that's wonderful, Stephen. And I know we're running out of time, but I just want to sort of like mention too, it's wonderful to hear from a male's point of view, because I don't know about America, but definitely here in Australia, when you start talking about patriarchy and matriarchy, I don't know, there's a group of men, shall we say, that, and we all sort of know where they are, that get upset because they think that it's male versus female, it's man against women. But it's not. It's a whole different concept.
It's true egalitarian. It's true equality. But again, women were not just equal. Even through the dynastic in Egypt, they were considered superior because they were the source of life. I said the word. The Egyptologists used the word Hemet. They use it to mean chief royal wife. That's who they call the Pur'ah. The Pur'ah they call the chief royal wife. Nonsense. There was no such word as wife in their language. Hemeti meant woman of power. Every woman in her home was a Hemeti. She was the woman of power. So Isis' throne that's on her head, not only is the symbol of kingship, is a symbol of female power, because the woman was supposed to be seated in a high chair with her feet off the ground, and she was supposed to be served. Totally opposite the way it is in patriarchal society. The woman's got to cook the meals. She serves the husband first, then the children, then she eats. Total nonsense. Once a daughter became of age, and of age in ancient prehistoric Kemet was 8 years old, she would be cooking the meals. Mama wouldn't be cooking anymore, and she would be served first, then the children, then the male. So, but it doesn't mean that men were considered to be inferior. Absolutely not. There was an understanding of the sacred masculine, which every man should get to identify with, but every man must understand the sacred feminine is within him. I became conscious of it in the 70s. I surrendered myself to ISIS. I said, do with me as thou will. And I said, I am going to be a feminist for the rest of my life. And I have been blessed by having had relationships with incredible women in my lifetime who I always saw not only as a lover, not only as a sexual partner, but as a teacher. And I learned from. And men have to understand that mother, starting with mother, who was the first teacher in our lives, women have to teach men how to become men. This is what it means by hot or. Hot or. Hot means place. Hor is the boy. Horus, the place of the boy. The place where the boy becomes a man is by woman. And this is not a sexual sense, because as I said to Jocelyn, the ancient Cometians, even dynastic Cometians, were not heterosexual. They were not homosexual. They were not bisexual. They were pansexual. There was no norms like there is in Judeo-Christian Islamic society. Nothing was taboo. And so there was not an understanding to be left. Men knew who they were. They understood themselves as a sacred masculine, but understood that the great mother was the mother of all.
Mm, mm. And definitely she is. And I think that's a perfect, I know we could sit here and listen to you talk for ages, but time is against us. And I do want to mention, because of all the tours and your background, that you have a unique opportunity next year, 2025, that you will be leading a tour. And we've mentioned Jocelyn and Patricia, who's also part of this event, to Egypt. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about that? Because the details will be below this recording anyway.
October 20th to November 3rd. So that's it. October 20th to November 3rd, 2025. Yes, the prices have gone up. As we said to Jocelyn, don't let money be an obstacle. If you're supposed to go to Egypt, the money will appear and you find a way. But I will be doing full-bore Hakim teachings, full-bore chematology, full-bore the sacred mother and the feminine, and understanding. We will show the difference between Egyptology and chematology and how this came. And as Hakim said, this is not theory. We are bringing ancient indigenous wisdom. We don't debate it. People can discuss it and say, well, I don't agree with this, don't agree with that. Fine. If you have some evidence, you have some proof. But we're not discussing it as it's a different theory. It is what it is. And that's the way it was. And it's the way, and we're going to return to it, but not go back to the old way. We're going to come to a new understanding where women will understand their role and be getting rid of the shackles of patriarchy. No woman should ever be subservient to any male rules or laws.
I think that sounds a fantastic way to sort of end our discussion, Stephen. Unfortunately, you said I'd love to listen to your knowledge, your wisdom more, but we are running out of time. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today, even with our technological difficulties. It's been absolutely a delight listening to you.
Thank you.
And again, to our listeners, more details about Stephen, about this one fantastic tour that he'll be leading next year with Jocelyn Starfeather and Patricia, as well as how you can reach out to him if you want to learn more, will be listed below this recording.
And I am not alone. I am not alone. A lot of men are waking up to this understanding, more than I was when I was young. A lot of men are waking up to understanding this. And that's the hope for the future.
And as you said, it's almost like we need to sort of rebrand or find another word for feminism, because it's been so attacked over the last millennium. But it's a word that we are familiar with, and it is almost like a challenge, a big step. Like, how manly are you can you call yourself a feminist in this patriarchal world?
Right.
So, right. And so we are running out of time, as I said. So to everybody who's watching this, Natalia, thank you very much for joining in our discussions with Stephen Mehler. I hope you have enjoyed it, despite our technological difficulties, as much as I have. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Blessed be.
Blessings.